What is going on, YouTube? Welcome back to Fireside Rangers. I'm your host, Eric Wilson, today joined by my co-host, Colin Alcabes. Today, we've got some pretty big discussions to talk about. Apparently, after the Rangers lost to the Edmonton Oilers, they announced that pretty much nobody's safe, and they added a couple of pretty notable names to the trade block. Chris Kreider, Jacob Trouba, and Ryan Lindgren are all reportedly open to any possible trade that a team might want to make an offer for. So we might be seeing a pretty different team. The Rangers are looking for that shakeup a little earlier than we thought they would. And I think last night's loss to the St. Louis Blues might just add a little bit more fuel to that fire. So we're going to be talking about these rumors, about how we feel, what we might be looking for in return for some of these big name players. But before we do that, make sure you guys like, subscribe, ring that bell so you don't miss notification. Leave your thoughts down in that comment section below. And be sure to follow us on all of our social media platforms at Fireside Rangers. I apologize if I start to freeze up a little bit. I'm out in the wilderness at the moment. So if the hood goes up, it just means I'm cold. But Colin, how are you doing today, my friend?
I'm good. It's crazy to me that you're in the middle of the woods and you're probably getting better Wi-Fi than Will would in his dorm or in his house or wherever he's at. I think that's crazy. But anyway, yeah. Talking back to the Rangers, rough couple of games. Obviously, our first losing streak of the season. They've strung together three pretty bad losses, 40-plus shots allowed in all three. The last two alone, we've lost by a combined score of 11-4, and that simply won't do it. Is this a move by management to maybe scare some players and get them to perform, or get other guys to keep their boys around? Maybe, the thought of trading Mika's boyfriend, Chris Kreider, scares him and he starts to show up a little bit. Or is this a legit thing and he's actually looking to shake up the roster? I think that it's definitely something that he has to consider given the production. I know they aren't necessarily a bad team, but we're hitting a bad stretch pretty early, and a lot of players outside of Will Cooley aren't showing up. So, it's definitely worth mentioning that these guys, I will say all three of them have, I believe Lindgren doesn't. Lindgren's a full move. You can get rid of him at any point to any team. Jacob Trouba and Chris Kreider both have 15-team no-trade lists. They have modified no-trade clauses. So those are definitely something that we have to pay attention to here. But I don't know if you want to go player by player and who you want to keep, who you want to get rid of, if there's something like that.
I think we'll go player by player. I do want to start with Ryan Lindgren, though, because I think out of all the contracts that we're going to be talking about today, Ryan Lindgren is the most movable. As you said, you just no trade clause at all there. And I think out of all the players we will be talking about, Lindgren is the one who needs to go the most. I like Lindgren. I always have, but the obvious problem that most people should know about if you're a Rangers fan is the fact that he's always injured. He started off the season missing a couple of games. Definitely not a good sign for him either. And then ever since his return, I don't know if he came back too early or if he's just not meshing with his line mates this year, but he has not looked good. He's been a defensive liability, maybe not as much as guys like Keandre Miller, who I think need to also be on the trade block. But for some reason, Miller's not. But Ryan Lindgren has struggled. He's injury prone. And I think if the Rangers do want to shake up their core, he is one of the guys they need to look to move. And of everyone we're going to talk about today, like I said, he would be the easiest. Trading a guy like Trouba or Kreider might be a little bit harder just because of the size of their contracts, in my opinion. But a guy like Lindgren doesn't make that much. He's a certified top-line player playing with Adam Fox for the last couple of years. So I think if anyone needs to be moved first, it should be Ryan Lindgren. It would make me sad to see because I like Lindgren, like I said, but I know at this point it is what it is. We're on a 3-game losing streak. We've been outshot in our last 3 games by at least like 40 shots or something crazy like that. Something big needs to change, and I think it's going to start with Lindgren.
Yeah, no, I kind of agree. I don't know that he's the one I want off the team most. I do think that Keandre Miller should be on the trade block, but that's another.
Oh, yeah. I'm just mean out of the 3 players that we're going to talk about today.
Of the 3, I'd probably want to see Trouba go most. Not because he's playing bad. I actually think he's been like semi-serviceable. I just think that cap hit is brutal. I know we talk about it all the time. Having $8 million back on the books, or even $6 million, if you can get some of it retained and get rid of like $6 million of it, you can get a pretty serviceable defenseman and then a good depth guy at the same time. just because, it opens up a lot for the cap space and what you can do at the deadline. But, Lindgren, he's always been like that solid guy when he's healthy. The problem is, as you mentioned, he's never really healthy. Him and Fox have been playing together for almost the entirety of the career. Outside of this year, there's been a little bit of the change up. At only 26 years old, he stands at 6 foot, 190. Never been a points guy. He's got 1 goal and 1 assist for 15 games a season. I can't find his plus minus on Puck PD because I don't know how that works yet. But I kind of signing in the first place. So with no immediate option there, like I don't know that I trust team or Jones to step up. Lindgren does typically play big minutes. I don't know, not a viable option in place. I don't know that I'd be like super apt to get rid of him, but at the same time, half the decor is underperforming. So something's got to give. The defense has really been struggling as of late, as I mentioned before. 40 plus goal or shots in the last 3 games. They've just been getting lit up like a Christmas tree. So their ability to break out the puck. I'll give a shout out to Dylan Vigna, who occasionally appears on this podcast here. He was talking to me about how the defense's inability to break out the puck is one of the biggest things for this team right now, and how they just can't make that first pass. And the more I watch, the more I agree. I feel like they've really struggled with that. And then just sloppy turnovers, struggling to tie people up out in front. There was one last night where Lindgren literally just watched the guy go right by him and tuck it in instead of tying him up. So, it's the lack of physicality from him that is kind of surprising for me. And I really think that I'll say that for Trouba as well. So I'm going to be a little repetitive, but the whole decor has just been lacking physicality, which is why I think that needs to shake up more than the offense does. But yeah, no, I mean, obviously Lindgren's been on this team since the Rick Nash trade. He's had a lot of big moments for us, and I'd be sad to see him go. But he's just not really getting it done right now. So I'd be intrigued to see what the return will be for him.
Yeah, it would be interesting. And the next player that I was going to move into was going to be Trouba, because I feel like we'd be kind of reiterating the same points. So like my Trouba speech is going to be really short. Obviously Trouba last season was god awful. We begged and pleaded for him to be traded pretty much all summer long. And I will admit, at the start of this year, he looked better. He became not an immediate concern. It was like something that we could worry about later on, because he was playing playable defense, but him and Miller together are just absolutely terrible. And, obviously they got split up for a little bit, and Trouba looked a little bit better. But to me, the reason why I think Trouba needs to be traded is just his contract. It just comes down to that $8 million number. And, I've had minor issues with his defense and his leadership. The biggest one especially comes from last night against the Blues, after the Rangers get dismantled by a team that is under 500. The only player on the entire team that has any sort of captain's patch, whether it be the C or the A, to speak afterwards was Artemi Panarin. I'm like, Jacob Trouba, you are the captain. Get out there and address these problems. Don't leave it to the man who speaks half English. So, like, I have my little problems with Trouba, like stuff like that. But I'm all for trading Trouba. There's nothing against him, nothing about his skill, at least so far this season. The biggest thing to me is his contract. And I don't even care what we would get in return. The biggest return would be $8 million off the books, depending on any salary retained. But that's just the way I see it. I don't know if you have anything else, but pretty much everything I said about Lindgren applies to Trouba, except for the fact that his contract is much larger.
Yeah, no, I mean, I am not, like I said before, I'm not necessarily disappointed with how he's played this season. It's serviceable. I'm not going to say great, but it's been good. Not something that you're going to pay $8 million for. But we talk about that all the time. He was never going to live up to the contract. He's playing serviceable hockey. If they were to keep him, obviously, for cap purposes, I'd be a little upset. But in terms of personnel, I don't know that I'd be distraught. Like, these are guys who, like, I could go either way on. You know what I mean? Like, the only reason why I'd want to trade Trouba is that contract. But, like, as far as play this season goes, I'd keep him around. And same goes for Lindgren. Like none of these guys I want to get rid of, but something needs to change after the series of games that they played, allowing the shots that they did, not only this year, but in the playoffs last year where they only outshot an opponent one time. Yes, even the Capitals, who they swept, they only outshot them one time in 4 games. And going on the rest of the series, the rest of the season or playoffs, we did not outshoot another team. So I think that's definitely an alarming stat and something that, we need
Very
to
alarming.
very, very, very quickly fix. Just because we've seen we have amazing goaltending, and so we need to kind of capitalize on it now this year before we have to pay them like loads and loads of money here. But yeah, back to Trouba. I mean, 6 assists in 20 games. He's a +1 with 17 penalty minutes, but he's averaging 20 minutes of ice time a game, which is pretty solid. He's not the point guy we thought he was going to be. He'll never be that guy. He put up 50 points with the Jets in his last season and hasn't even come close to that since joining the Rangers. He's always hovering around a negative plus minus. He's usually in single digits, so it's like I just don't even know what the return would be for him. It would have to be a cap dump. You'd have to retain a lot of salary because it's not a rental. You're getting it for the next 2 years. So there would have to be salary retained, and it would have to be a team that would be willing to take on that contract. And they think that he would either provide the leadership or the depth that they would need to maybe make a run, or the leadership for a good young team. So who really knows? That would be a tough one to move. I'd be shocked if they got it done. There were teams knocking on the door during the offseason, but they didn't want to sign him, or they didn't want to do that trade because of his wife's residency, which we've discussed a million times. And I'm sure everybody's tired of hearing that, so I won't go too in depth with that. But he's the captain. It'd be tough to move on from the captain. He is definitely, while he doesn't provide a lot of, and I know you got into a little bit there, but he's a big guy in the locker room. I know that we don't see a lot of that, but the way that the players talk about him, at least in reports that I've read and things like that, he is well regarded in that locker room. So it'd be tough to remove that kind of leadership. Even though from the outside point of view, it doesn't seem like it. And I know there'll probably be a bunch of comments down below disagreeing with me. But you don't just give the captain anybody. I feel like there's a reason. And while we not, as fans, might not see it, there's definitely a lot of stuff that goes on behind closed doors. So I think that would be a tough thing for the team. But I also think it might be a wake-up call. Sometimes moving on from a captain is like, oh, we did that. We didn't play well enough. And so now he's gone. And I think maybe that's what Drury's trying to do here, is like a fear tactic. But I know I guess we'll see. That this last player is the one that I'm going to be the most vocal about.
Yeah, there's a reason I saved Christopher James Kreider for last. I feel like we need to just like warm up a little bit, and then now we're getting into like the meat and potatoes of this discussion. Chris Kreider, longest tenured Ranger, been around for over a decade. I love him with all my heart. I don't want to see him be traded. But apparently what the Rangers are looking for is a shakeup. They want their core to change. To me, the only positive that I can see from trading Kreider would be the return. I saw a post about this on Twitter earlier. I don't remember who it was from, but it's not an original thought from me, is that Chris Kreider is a guy who has proven himself time and time again. He's a great goal scorer, especially on the power play. He's a proven successful playoff performer too, and the Rangers' playoff record with him is absolutely incredible. So, it's like everything that a general manager would be looking for in a player, which would, I think Lindgren, maybe you get a decent guy, maybe a couple good picks. Trouba, you're going to have to eat half that salary. If we're talking about any trade that would garner a phenomenal return, I think it would be Chris Kreider. Now, with that being said, I don't want to see Kreider go. I think this problem and his struggles, not having a single assist at all this entire year, boils down to Mika Zibanejad. And I think if there's any player that needs to be traded, it is Mika Zibanejad. But unfortunately, he has one of the most untradeable contracts in the entire NHL, and he's not going to go anywhere. So I think the only reason Chris Kreider is involved in these trade talks is because something big needs to change. And the only thing that is like reasonably changeable is Chris Kreider. So I would be very upset if we traded him. I think I would feel the same way I did when we traded Matt Zuccarello, where it's like maybe it needed to be done, maybe it didn't, but at least we got something in return. And maybe it'll help us out in the future. Maybe it won't. And I'm just sad to see a guy that I love go. So I'm not even going to get into stats or anything with Kreider. I'm just going to say I'd be very sad if it happened, and it would feel like the end of an era. He's the last player on this team that was there in 2014 when we made it to the finals.
Mm-hmm.
And it'd be like the last piece of my childhood, like ripped away from me. But not to get too emotional, but it would make me sad. But it's a business at the end of the day. If it wins me a Stanley Cup, I'd be fine with it, but I'd be sad until that happened.
Yeah, I mean, Chris Kreider I think he was just starting when I first started watching. So he's been there for a while. And like I said, or like you said, longest tenure player. He's like the backbone of this team now, or he was. I mean, dude, I can count a bunch of clutch moments this guy's had easily off the top of my head. And he's just been playing for so long, it's hard to pick. But it's also hard to get a guy who could score 30 to 40 goals now consistently. I know that was a struggle early on in his career. But a 30 to 40 goal scorer for 6.5 mil, it's not really that common anymore. It would be hard to find a guy who could do that. So, I mean, he's on a really good deal given the value that he provides. I know right now he's slumping a little bit, but 9 goals really is still pretty good. Obviously, you'd love to see him do a little bit more, and it's tough because Riley Smith hasn't really been what we thought he was going to be. Mika Zibanejad's taken another step back, and keeps flirting with turning it around. He hasn't really done it yet. No, I'd be crushed. I'd be crushed if Kreider went. Kreider's one of my favorite players. He's another leadership guy. He's always the last one off the ice. He's giving everybody the high fives, whatever. He's the first one pretty much to Shesterkin after a win, who isn't, if he's not on the ice, the first one off the bench there every time. I don't know. I unfortunately, I think out of all of them, I think that he probably is the most enticing, and you're right. He would provide the best return. I think that if you're looking for a guy who can help you get you over that hump, if you have the cap space as a team who's looking to make a push, he could be that guy. But as a team who is looking to get over the hump and make that push, we could still use him. So I think it's silly to even consider trading him. I would hard no it unless the return was literally phenomenal. Well, like you said, if in the end it was to help us win a cup, I would be like, yeah. But if it didn't, I'd want to draw his head on a pike.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, you can go back to the year where nobody showed up against the Devils and we lost in the first round, except for Kreider. Kreider was getting it done himself. I mean, the guy he was on pace to break the goals scored in the playoff series. And then you go to last year, he scored a natural hat trick against the Hurricane to push us over into the next round. It doesn't get more clutch than that. You want to talk about a guy who shows up, not to mention he's probably has one of the best hands in the league in terms of deflecting. He's one of the best net front presences in the league, which demands attention, which opens up the rest of the ice. He's still got a lot of speed. He's a great penalty killer. I think he leads the league in shorthanded goals, among active players. And probably he's up there for power play goals as well. So, he's a guy who does it in all facets of the game. On top of the fact that he's a leader, on top of the fact that he's a great contract, it seems silly and like a step backwards to trade a guy like that. I'd be much more inclined to trade the other two, just because I think it's the D core that needs a shakeup more than the forwards. But that's just me. Obviously, Drury has his own plan in place, and if he gets the right deal that he thinks would benefit the Rangers now, maybe going forward, obviously you have to consider it. But I will never advocate for a Chris Kreider trade. I just won't. It would go against everything in my core.
I wouldn't either. The only thing that I can kind of reasonably make rationale for would just be the return, but I don't want to see it happen. I like what you said, a big step backward. I agree with that. But at the end of the day, these are all just rumors that we're talking about. It is like an official report that they are on the trade block, but whether a trade goes through or not will be up to the future and Chris Drury to decide. So we'll be keeping a close eye on this. I recommend that you all do too. I feel like we could sit here and talk about this for hours, but currently I'm fighting frostbite. So we're going to wrap up this episode, but we'll be back to talk about it more. So if you guys did enjoy, please make sure that you like, subscribe, ring that bell to miss notification, leave your thoughts down in that comment section below. And lastly, be sure to follow us on all all of our social media platforms at Fireside Rangers. I hope you enjoyed my nice outdoor freezing special. Feel like I'm in like Winterfell right now, north of the wall, but anything for the fans, anything for the Fireside. But if you guys did enjoy, do everything that I just said. Most importantly, have a good one, and
Let's go
Rangers.
Rangers.